Some people vanish without a trace. Others disappear in ways that feel calculated. Scenes staged, clues misplaced, timelines that don't add up. In these cases, the mystery isn't just who vanished, but how the truth later twisted everything we thought we knew. Let's uncover 5 people who vanished and left behind impossible mysteries. Story 1. On a quiet stretch of England's northeast coast, a red canoe drifted back to shore without its owner. The North Sea was calm that morning, the sky unremarkable, the conditions ordinary, but by nightfall, one man was missing, and a family stood at the edge of a mystery that would linger for years, one that appeared at first to be a tragic accident claimed by the sea. John Darwin was in his early 50s, a former school teacher and prison officer living in Seaton Carew, County Durham. He was married to Anne Darwin, a medical receptionist, and together they had 2 adult sons, Mark and Anthony. To neighbors and colleagues, the Darwins appeared ordinary, quiet, private, and hardworking. Behind closed doors, however, the family was under growing financial strain, struggling with debt tied to property investments and a large mortgage. On March 21, 2002, John Darwin was seen paddling his canoe, named Orca, out into the North Sea. When he failed to return home or report for work later that day, Anne contacted authorities. A major search operation followed. Coast Guard teams, helicopters, and rescue boats combed the water and shoreline. The next day, Darwin's paddle was recovered. Weeks later, pieces of his shattered canoe washed ashore. Despite extensive efforts, nobody was ever found. In April 2003, after more than a year without answers, a coroner issued an open verdict, and John Darwin was legally declared dead. His family mourned. His sons grieved a father they believed had drowned at sea. For years, the case appeared closed, a presumed maritime tragedy. Anne Darwin collected life insurance and pension payouts, totaling hundreds of thousands of pounds. She publicly appealed for information, presenting herself as a grieving widow. Then came the twist. In December 2007, more than 5 years after his disappearance, John Darwin walked into a London police station and calmly told officers, "I think I'm a missing person." He claimed to have amnesia and no memory of the past 5 years. Investigators were already suspicious. Financial records raised red flags, and Anne's plans to move abroad drew scrutiny. The case unraveled completely when a photograph surfaced online showing John and Anne together in Panama, taken while John was supposedly dead. Police discovered that John Darwin had been the architect of his own disappearance. He had staged the canoe accident, then secretly lived in a bedsit next to the family home, accessed through a concealed passage hidden behind a wardrobe. Later, he traveled internationally using a false passport under the name of a deceased child. The death was deliberately staged, allowing insurance money to be fraudulently claimed over several years. False identities were created and used to obtain official documents, enabling international travel and the construction of a hidden life beyond public view. In this case, speculation eventually gave way to documented evidence, leaving no need for theories, only the unsettling reality of a disappearance that was carefully engineered from the start. The greatest damage was not financial, it was emotional. John and Anne's sons, who had mourned their father for years, learned they had unknowingly been part of a lie. In public statements, they described feeling deceived, manipulated, and deeply hurt. Their trust was shattered. The couple was convicted of fraud in 2008 and sentenced to more than 6 years in prison each. The stolen money was eventually recovered, but the family relationships were permanently altered. Even after release, reconciliation proved difficult, and long periods of estrangement followed. What does it do to a family when grief itself is built on deception? Can a disappearance still haunt others, even when the missing person was never truly gone? Story 2. On a quiet summer evening in June 2009, a solitary traveler arrived in the coastal town of Sligo, Ireland. He carried modest luggage, spoke with a foreign accent, and appeared calm and self-contained. To locals, he seemed like just another visitor passing through, unnoticed, unremarkable, and unknowable. The man introduced himself as Peter Bergmann. He claimed to be from Vienna, Austria, providing a specific street address at check-in. Later, authorities would discover the address did not exist. Physically, he appeared to be in his late 50s or early 60s. He was neatly dressed, well-groomed, and polite. Hotel staff recalled him as quiet and courteous, someone who avoided attention. He smoked frequently, spent long hours walking alone, and did not socialize. No confirmed records of Peter Bergmann existed, not in Austria, not elsewhere in Europe, and not in international databases. No one could verify his past, family, or profession. Between June 12th and June 15th, Bergmann's movements were captured on CCTV across Sligo. He repeatedly left his hotel carrying a purple plastic bag filled with unknown items. Each time he returned, the bag was empty. On June 13th, he visited the local post office and purchased several stamps and airmail stickers. It remains unknown whether he mailed anything, and if so, to whom. On June 15th, he checked out of the hotel shortly after noon. He stopped at the bus station cafe, ordered a cappuccino and a toasted sandwich, and sat alone. CCTV footage shows him carefully examining pieces of paper, folding and unfolding them before tearing them up and throwing them away. That afternoon, he boarded a bus to Ross's Point, a quiet beach outside town. Witnesses later reported seeing him walking calmly along the shoreline, greeting passers-by. His final confirmed sighting was late that night. Early the next morning, a body was discovered on Ross's Point Beach. The man was wearing swim trunks, with his clothing neatly arranged nearby. There was no identification, no wallet, no phone. Every clothing label had been removed. The post-mortem revealed advanced prostate cancer, bone tumors, and signs of past heart disease. Despite this, no medication, not even pain relief, was found in his system. The official cause of death was cardiac failure. There were no signs of violence or third-party involvement. Police conducted an extensive investigation. DNA, fingerprints, and dental records were checked internationally. No matches were found. No missing persons reports aligned with his description. Then a disturbing pattern emerged. The CCTV analysis showed Bergmann consistently avoiding camera coverage. He disposed of items only in blind spots. Investigators concluded the purple bag had been used to systematically discard personal belongings across town. The false address, the cash payments, the removed labels, all pointed to intention. The twist: this was not an accidental or confused disappearance. Peter Bergmann planned his disappearance perfectly. Theories that he was a spy or criminal were explored but never supported by evidence. The most widely accepted conclusion is that he was terminally ill and deliberately erased his identity before his death. Facts and theories were clearly separated. What remains undeniable is the level of planning. No family members ever came forward. No friends, no employer. No one claimed him. After 5 months, Peter Bergmann was buried in an unmarked grave. Only a handful of people attended: police officers and cemetery staff. His true name remains unknown. What moments from his life did he choose not to leave behind? And who, somewhere in the world, never realized he was gone? Story 3. In rural Washington state, surrounded by quiet roads and tall trees, stood a modest farmhouse that few people questioned. From the outside, it looked like an ordinary family home. Inside, it became the center of one of the most disturbing abuse cases in modern American history, a place where people entered and quietly vanished. Michelle Shelly Knotek lived in Raymond, Washington, with her husband David and their children children. To neighbors, Shelly appeared controlling but unremarkable. She volunteered at school, maintained appearances, and projected authority. Behind closed doors, she ruled through fear. Those who came into her home, friends, relatives, boarders, often arrived during moments of vulnerability. Shelly offered help, shelter, or support. Once inside, control replaced kindness. Over time, several people connected to the Knotek household disappeared. In 1991, Kathy Loreno, a 36-year-old hairdresser, moved in after a falling out with her family. Over the next several years, witnesses later described Kathy being isolated, physically abused, deprived of food, and subjected to severe punishment. In 1994, Kathy vanished. The Knoteks told authorities she had run away with a truck driver and moved to California. No evidence supported this claim, but without a body, the story remained unchallenged. Soon after, Shane Watson, Shelly's teenage nephew, also disappeared. The Knoteks claimed he had gone to Alaska to work on a fishing boat. Years later, Ronald Woodworth, a local man who had moved into the home, became the next victim. Neighbors witnessed him being publicly humiliated and forced into dangerous physical punishments. In 2003, he, too, vanished. Each time, explanations were offered. Each time, no one pushed further, at least not right away. The truth began to surface when investigators re-examined Woodworth's disappearance. David Knotek eventually confessed, revealing a pattern of extreme abuse and violence inside the home. Investigators learned that Kathy Loreno had died after prolonged torture. Her body was burned and her remains scattered. Shane Watson had been shot and cremated. Ronald Woodworth was buried on the property after being beaten and neglected. Shelly Knotek was charged with second-degree murder and manslaughter. David Knotek faced murder charges as well. The courtroom revelations were horrifying. Witnesses described starvation, beatings, forced labor, and deliberate humiliation. Prosecutors stated Shelly showed extreme indifference to human life. In 2004, Shelly Knotek was sentenced to 22 years in prison. For many, the case felt closed. Then came the twist. In November 2022, after serving approximately 18 years, Shelly Knotek was released from prison. The jaw-dropping twist. In a story defined by disappearances, the villain disappeared back into society, not the victims. No press conference, no public warning beyond required notifications. She simply walked out, alive and free, while her victims never got that chance. Shelly's surviving daughters have spoken publicly about the abuse they endured and witnessed. For them, the release reopened wounds that never truly healed. The families of the victims were left with permanent loss. No remains to bury, no full closure, and now the knowledge that the person responsible was no longer behind bars. David Knotek was released years earlier. The victims' names, however, remain tied forever to the house where they vanished. How does a community move forward when justice feels unfinished? And what does accountability mean when time runs out, but memory doesn't? Story 4. In early October 2021, on a major Swedish highway, an unmarked police vehicle traveling at high speed crossed the median and collided with an oncoming truck. The crash ignited a fire so intense that 3 lives ended instantly. Inside the vehicle was a man who had lived under constant protection for over a decade, an artist whose name had long been tied to danger, controversy, and unresolved threats. Lars Vilks was born in Helsingborg, Sweden, in 1946. He earned a doctorate in art history and became a respected academic, teaching at prominent Scandinavian art institutions. Alongside his theoretical work, Vilks pursued conceptual art that often challenged authority and convention. In the 1980s, he constructed large sculptures from driftwood and stone inside a protected nature reserve, later declaring the site an independent micronation called Ladonia. His work blended art, protest, and institutional critique, often inviting legal disputes and public debate. Internationally, Vilks became best known after 2007, when his drawings depicting the Prophet Muhammad sparked global outrage. From that moment forward, his life fundamentally changed. Death threats followed. A bounty was placed on his head. Invitations vanished. Daily life became highly restricted. Vilks continued to speak and write, but always under police protection. For the final 14 years of his life, freedom was replaced by security protocols, guarded travel, and isolation. On October 3rd, 2021, Vilks attended a private dinner near Stockholm before beginning the return journey home. He traveled in an unmarked police vehicle, accompanied by 2 armed bodyguards, standard procedure due to long-standing threats. While driving along the E4 motorway near Markaryd, the vehicle suddenly swerved across the central barrier into oncoming traffic. A truck approaching at speed had no time to avoid impact. The collision caused an immediate fire. Vilks and both police officers were pronounced dead at the scene. The truck driver survived with injuries and was taken to hospital. Within hours, authorities announced an investigation. Swedish police stated there was no evidence of criminal intent. Early findings suggested the possibility of a tire blowout or sudden loss of vehicle control. Witnesses described the car moving at high speed before crossing lanes. Because no external interference was immediately identified, the incident was treated as a traffic accident. Officials emphasized that there were no recent known threats against Vilks at the time of the crash. However, the broader context lingered quietly in the background. Vilks had lived under police protection for years due to credible threats, assassination plots, and previous attacks. His movements were normally planned and secured with exceptional care. Despite this, the investigation focused narrowly on mechanical causes. No public indication was given that alternative explanations were being explored. No extended inquiry into surrounding circumstances was announced. The case moved swiftly toward closure. The twist: Lars Vilks did not vanish physically, but the deeper pursuit of truth surrounding his death seemed to disappear. The investigation answered how the crash happened, but left little space to ask why scrutiny ended so quickly. Facts were documented. Questions quietly dissolved. Vilks left behind friends, colleagues, and a cultural legacy marked by debate and division. Public reactions reflected shock, grief, and reflection on the price of artistic expression. The deaths of the 2 police officers added another layer of tragedy, drawing focus toward loss rather than inquiry. Official statements emphasized mourning and closure. For those who had followed Vilks's life under threat, the abrupt finality felt unsettling, not because of proven wrongdoing, but because of unresolved silence. What truths can quietly vanish when certainty arrives too quickly, and when danger surrounds a life for years, can closure come too easily? Story 5. In the quiet border towns of northern Vermont, nights settle in early. Roads curve through farmland and forests where headlights are often the only movement after midnight. On one of those roads, just over a mile from a small restaurant, a single car would be found in a position so strange that it would leave investigators questioning whether what they were seeing was an accident or something carefully arranged. Brianna Alexandra Maitland was born on October 8, 1986, and raised on her family's farm near Montgomery, Vermont, close to the Canadian border. She grew up active and independent, trained extensively in jiu-jitsu, and was known by friends as determined and strong-willed. At 17, Brianna wanted more independence. She moved out of her parents' home, stayed with friends, worked multiple jobs, and enrolled in a GED program. Despite the instability that came with growing independence, she remained close to her family and spoke openly about future plans, including college. 3 weeks before her disappearance, Brianna was assaulted at a party by a former friend, resulting in a broken nose and concussion. Charges were filed, though investigators later stated the incident was not directly connected to what followed. On Friday, March 19, 2004, Brianna completed her final GED exam. She spent the afternoon with her mother celebrating, shopping, and running errands. At one point, Brianna briefly stepped outside a store. When she returned, her mother noticed she seemed shaken and distracted, though Brianna offered no explanation. That evening, Brianna drove to her job at the Black Lantern Inn in Montgomery. She completed her shift and clocked out around 11:20 p.m., telling coworkers she needed rest before working again the next morning. She was last seen leaving the restaurant alone, walking into the darkness of the parking lot. The following afternoon, a Vermont state trooper discovered Brianna's car along Route 118 in Richford. The Oldsmobile was backed hard into the side of an abandoned farmhouse known locally as the Dutchburn House. The impact had dislodged a piece of plywood which lay across the trunk. Inside the car were Brianna's paychecks. Outside were loose change, a water bottle, and an unsmoked cigarette. The doors were unlocked. Brianna was gone. Initially, the scene was treated as an abandoned vehicle, possibly a drunk driver who fled. The car was towed, and no immediate missing person report was filed. Days later, Brianna's parents learned the vehicle had already been recovered. Her ATM card, glasses, contact lens case, and migraine medication were still inside. As the investigation continued, law enforcement acknowledged the scene may have been staged to resemble an accident. For years, the discovery of Brianna's car was described as a strange but possibly random event. An accident, a misjudgment, a moment of teenage impulsivity, but the details refused to settle. Brianna was physically capable, trained in self-defense, and had plans for the following day. There was no evidence she intended to abandon her car, her belongings, or her life. Witnesses later reported seeing the vehicle late that night with its lights on, a turn signal blinking, and at least one person standing near the headlights. Another vehicle was seen speeding away nearby. Investigators later stated that foul play was likely. DNA was recovered from the car, and in 2022 authorities confirmed a match, though no identity was released. What once appeared chaotic began to look deliberate. For more than 2 decades, Brianna's parents have searched for answers. Leads came and went. Anonymous tips, alleged sightings, and even a possible serial killer connection that was ultimately ruled out. In 2016, the abandoned farmhouse where Brianna's car was found burned down, erasing a physical landmark but not the mystery. Brianna Maitland has never been found. No arrests have been made. And the question remains, was this the result of chance or a moment carefully staged to look that way? Some disappear by chance, others vanish by design. Across these stories, the twists reveal something deeper, a death that wasn't real, a life erased on purpose, a villain who slipped away, a truth that faded, and a disappearance that may not have been random at all. What's missing isn't just people, it's certainty. And until answers surface, these stories remain unfinished. This is Vanished Stories, where the missing are never forgotten.